What is salvation? Feelings of anxiety. How do we overcome stress and anxiety? Can how to do mindfulness meditation help us with stress and anxiety? Is God real? The power of your subconscious mind, the ego. Could salvation mean being free of the ego mind? The way to success. Could salvation mean finally finding the way to success? I'm going to share a principle, a spiritual metaphysical principle from A Course in Miracles today too. Hey everyone, James Nussbaumer, and thank you for joining me in another episode of For a Better Life podcast. And today is Sunday, July 8th, 2018. Early in the morning as I sip on my morning coffee, and I'm just so thrilled this morning. We've got just a tremendous day ahead. The sun is just shining through so nice, and it's just a wonderful summer day in Northeast Ohio. We had a few people in my mastermind group message me in this week, and Ollie and Lenora of the Biloxi, Mississippi area. Ollie and Lenora have been married for over 40 years. And they had written in and asked me to explain a little further in one of my upcoming podcasts about what really is salvation. We hear all these, to be saved. To be saved from what? And Jim, Ollie had asked, could you, tell us a little bit, share maybe a few experiences from your prison confinement where you'd spent 8 long years. For those of you that don't know me, yes, I was in a state penitentiary for 8 long years from 2007 to 2015 for over a foolish securities violation in my practice as a financial advisor. And let me tell you, I was in prison with some hardcore, there's no such thing as a white collar crimes prison in a state penitentiary. You're just thrown in with everybody else. And most of my fellow inmates were doing life sentences for murder and rape and all kinds of terrible things. Although I did meet some people doing life sentences that really did not do the crime, but they just lost their case to a jury and were found guilty, even though they weren't. And they told me the story, and some of them I actually believed them. And so, I was always attracted to those kind of people. They seemed to have found me. But anyways, I was sentenced to 10 years. And finally, a higher court saw it their way to release me after 8 years. And I've detailed that in my first book, The Master of Everything, A Story of Mankind in the World of Illusion We Call Life. And it's published, by the way, by Ozark Mountain Publishing Company. I want to get that out of the way right now. Ozark Mountain Publishing Company is just a wonderful mainstream publisher that found their way to support my work while I was already in prison, is where my books were written from. When I walked out of prison after 8 years, my first book was already on sale in stores everywhere. What a wonderful feeling that was for me. But now we've got book 3 is out. So there's book 2, the sequel, called Mastering Your Own Spiritual Freedom, and book 3, And Then I Knew My Abundance. All 3 were written from prison, but book 3 was just released about 2 months ago. So I hope that it's an ever-developing series on how to redirect the mental power of our mistakes before acting on them into positive results. So Ollie and Lenora, I'm going to do my best to answer that salvation. In a way, salvation for me was knowing that when I walked out of prison, my first book was already published and on stores everywhere. I wasn't even able to see a copy of it until I'd walked out of prison. So to me, that was salvation in a way. But I'm going to explain further, and I'm going to share an experience with you today of my prison time. I met many people in prison, and I met one person in particular who really became special to me, and I've detailed him in my second book, the sequel, called Mastering Your Own Spiritual Freedom. Lessons from A Course in Miracles is the subtitle. And I tell my story about William, who I would call Willie for short, 78-year-old all-American grandfather who was sentenced to prison for 2.5 years, and we found each other there, and we became good friends while in prison, and just tremendous friends. But let's back up a minute and say, to be saved or salvation, do we know what we are truly wanting to be saved from? That's a pretty good question, isn't it? Let's trust the power of our subconscious mind. Yes, I mean that one thing for sure. I mean, this power of the subconscious mind means letting go of an ego-based thought system. In the ego-based thought system, which I'm not going to dwell on today because we won't have time for that, but throughout my whole book series, I enlighten you on how to allow the ego in you to fade away. And the ego is that fearful and doubting aspect in you that's constantly judging. It's that critical chatter that holds you back in life. That is the ego. Excuse me. And so, yes, one thing for sure, it means letting go of an ego-based thought system, which we can say that is salvation. And that's the power of the subconscious mind, when we can let go of the ego-based thought system and get over the idea of wondering, is God real? The only reason we have that idea in our mind sometimes, well, is God real? We all have had those thoughts, we all have. But that's the ego in us, which is filled with doubt and fear. And it's also the ego in us that sees an angry God, a God that's going to send us to hell, which, by the way, there is no such thing as a hell. No such thing as hell. Excuse me, as I sip on some more coffee. There cannot be a hell, because that would mean eternity is split in two. And eternity is whole. Eternity is one. Eternity is an ever-ending bliss. And to separate eternity in two, to have a hell and a heaven, would mean that God is forever in conflict. And heaven is in conflict. There's no conflict in eternity. Let's really think about that. But that's not the subject matter of today anyway. So moving on and understanding what is salvation means realizing the fact that eternity is one and that we are really, truly eternal. A Course in Miracles states, reason can lead you and your brother to the logical conclusion of your union. I'm going to repeat that. Reason can lead you and your brother to the logical conclusion of your union. Now, when I say your brother, the Course in Miracles states your brother. In my books, I break it down a little more for the ego to understand in us. The ego is the human aspect in us. And in my books, rather than say brother, I will say brother/sister. Although in eternity, there is no such thing as masculine or female overtones, because there's no such thing as masculine or female. But in my books, so it's easy to understand, I will say, rather than say brother, because keep a little feminine overtone in there too, brother/sister, which means our connection with each other beyond the body. So in the Course in Miracles says, reason can lead you and your brother to the logical conclusion of your union. That principle is saying reason can lead you and your brother/sister, who you are one with in mind, with your Creator. And that is your union, where we're all one together. So let me share a story about my old friend William, and Willie, I called him for short, the 78-year-old all-American grandfather who I became great friends with while in prison. And he was sentenced to prison at age 78, because it's a long story, and I've detailed that in my second book too. But to make it long story short, Willie was at odds and always in conflict with his stepdaughter, who didn't want Willie to be married to his mother. It was Willie's second marriage in life, where his first love of his life had died after 50 years of marriage. Willie got remarried, and there was a stepdaughter involved who was around 40 years old, who didn't want Willie to be married to her mother. And so they were always at odds and at conflict with each other. And so there came a boiling point between the two of them, and Willie was so upset with her, he stalked her. He followed her to church one day, and she had went into church on one Sunday morning, and while she was in church, he took an ice pick and slit her tires on her car. But he was sentenced to prison over that, because in Ohio it was a 5th-degree felony. In a lot of states they don't have five felonies; they only have 4. But in Ohio, which is very, very tough and very, very tough on crime state, a lot of reasons send people to prison in the state of Ohio. So Willie went to prison for 2.5 years for using an ice pick to get revenge on his daughter, who was worried that Willie was going to steal her inheritance from her mother when she one day died. In other words, she was worried that Willie was going to rob the estate, to where when her mother died, there would be no money left for her, but which wasn't the case, Willie told me, because he was retired from the post office and had a farm that he sold, and he was doing well. Anyway, Willie and I became good friends in prison, and so Willie figured out what the young inmates in prison really wanted. The young ones who are always wanting to cause trouble, the people are the gang members, and they call them gang bangers in prison. The gangs were ruthless. Even if you were an old person such as Willie at age 78, I was age 50 when I entered prison, but I made friends with Willie, who was 78. But I didn't run into Willie until I was already in prison for about 3 years. And Willie was just new to prison. So when we first met, I showed him the ropes a little bit. But anyways, to make a long story short, Willie figured out what the young inmates wanted. Not only did Willie find safety there in prison by understanding what the young inmates wanted, it was also his salvation. So Ollie and Lenora of Biloxi, Mississippi, that's where I'm leading to. So the entire story, like I'd said, is in book 2 of the series of my book. And Willie enjoyed watching and listening to the prison choir, 15 or so minutes of practice each Saturday morning, where the choir would practice. And yes, even many gang members were in the choir singing church songs on Sundays when we had church services, and Saturday morning was their practice. So yes, even the ruthless killers on the street who were sentenced to prison were in choir, because there was something touching them beyond the ego that made them want to be in the choir. Anyways, Willie noticed what they wanted. Not only did Willie had noticed that each member of the choir could use some sort of a folder to protect their sheet music. The papers that the choir director, who was another inmate as well, would have sheets of words, lyrics, and everything to songs, and which the chaplain of the prison, of course, gave them to the choir director. And the choir director, like I said, also an inmate in there doing a life sentence, distributed, and all the inmates that were in the choir had all these sheets of paper unorganized. So Willie said, these guys could use a folder. Each one of them have a little pocket folder to keep their sheet music in. Well, there's a little store in prison. It's a prison cell, but they call it a store, where the prison sells things to inmates. And on the list of things in the commissary, they call that, was pocket folders. And I think it was like you could buy 5 for $1 or something like that. Well, Willie bought enough. He went on and bought a bunch of those folders. So, and Willie always knew how to manage stress and anxiety and to help others to see more than just the tensions of everyday prison life. And, Willie was a pretty deep person, and he could see people to the core. So at his own expense, Willie purchased, through the commissary, pocket folders for each member of the choir. So at the next Saturday morning practice, Willie used his inner connection with the oneness that he knew that he had with them people, the oneness in him that had his kind heart by those pocket folders. We could say Willie used the likability laws of the universe and surprised each member of the choir with their own pocket folder. Now, for you people that have never been in prison, you might think, well, what's the big deal in a pocket folder? In prison, you really have nothing. When somebody gets you a gift, such as a brand new pocket folder to organize your sheet music in, and you're in the choir, that is a big deal. To have a brand new pocket folder given to you by another inmate, a gesture from his kind heart. So that really is a big deal. And the men were grateful for this thoughtful gift, and welcomed Willie to attend all their future choir practices that he would like. And so all the members of the choir looked at Willie as kind of a grandfather type, a giving and caring grandfather type, and the word got around quickly through the prison that, hey, this guy's pretty cool. Leave him alone, all you other guys. Don't bother Willie. He's a good dude, would be the prison lingo. And so, in a conversation I had with Willie about his kind act, he told me that this was not why he went to the effort to buy the folders, because it was a kind act. And I kind of, had a quizzical look on my face, and he said to me in a humorous way, he said, Jim, the real reason I bought those folders for those guys was to earn a friendship and get them to like me. And he continued chuckling as he had it. He says, if anything else, at least in this volatile and often violent din of the cell block, my safety is in this gesture, he said. And then he chuckled some more while trusting that I would keep the secret. So was Willie honest or what? Well, yes, of course he was honest. He was honest with himself. Excuse me, another sip of coffee. So yet the ego-based thought system can't really say or answer, what is there ever to be saved from? The ego seems to be fearful of the fact that salvation is already complete and perfect and is nowhere to be found down the road. But, it is here and now, and always now, we can say, in this instant now, is where your salvation sits for you. Excuse me again. And why I say it is here and now, in this instant now, where your salvation sits from you. So if you're grasping this story that I just said of Willie, and it's touched your heart in a way to maybe you parallel that with a certain situation of your own life. Excuse me once again. I apologize for that. Early in the morning, the pollen in the air is still thick here in Ohio too. But if you're with me here and this story had touched your heart a little bit, or just made you think a little bit about, like I'd said, the story about Willie parallels the situation of your own life, it's why maybe you are right here in this instant now feeling a little bit of salvation. Maybe that there's more to you than just a human body. If you're sensing that there's more to you than just a human body, you're going beyond your ego, and you're connecting with the power of your subconscious mind, which is God. And so does that answer the question, is God real? I'll let you answer that for yourself. But it's why the most successful people who have ever walked this earth, the most highly effective individuals ever, always found a way to success, because they know that the body is not really who they are. There's more to them than the body. It is your true essence that knows the answer to the question, is God real? And it's your true essence that knows what is true, and certainly knows what is not true. The things that the ego-based mind can make up, the things, the tactics, the stories that the ego in us from generations has taught us about why we should fear God, and that we're going to burn in hell forever if we don't do this right or do this wrong. But just as Willie, who accepted within himself why he really bought the pocket folders, regardless of what the choir members thought, Willie had the knowledge that he couldn't fool himself. And let me expand on that just a little bit farther. That he could not fool himself. And when I say that, I mean that, first of all, I must add that this is why I urge you to learn how to do mindfulness meditation, because it gets you to that alpha state where your creativity sits. The alpha, the beginning state of your mind, which is which is, we can say, the creation. That's where your creativity sits. And when you learn to do mindfulness meditation, you can come up with the answers to all the things that question you, such as, is salvation real? Or what is salvation? Is God real? Mindfulness meditation will give you answers that you just can't explain with the human tongue. So Willie's true essence was accepted by himself, and this is how he was to be saved, or we may say it was his salvation. You know, A Course in Miracles further helps us see that salvation, or to be saved, is the little smiles you can see within yourself, along with a wink and a nod to someone you're passing by, showing your mutual preference or joy over the world that, death and wretchedness seem to rule over us sometimes. So it is the understanding that you are not separate, and that your will and God's will are one. So somewhere along the line, the world started teaching us how to paint our portrait using the world's chosen colors and the world's own brushstrokes about how we believe in our own divine self. Your function, as well as God's will, is to use your own freely chosen colors, perfecting your own masterpiece. And this is what it truly means to be saved. Ali and Lenora of Biloxi, Mississippi, does that answer your question? I hope so. Let me add that this is the real and natural spirit in you that knows the meaning of what it means to truly be saved. It's the real and natural spirit in you that can actually reach the stars, because the stars are in your heart. The universe is in your mind. The power of the subconscious mind is the universe. All the glory you see in the midnight sky, the shooting star darting across perhaps, the full moon, the Big Dipper, and all of that is just a reflection of your inner abundance outward. What you're seeing is what's really within you, in your mind. So the universe is within you, and that is the way to success. The thing that highly effective individuals who've ever walked this planet have learned, the ones I've studied, they know that their abundance is within them, and they need to reflect that outwardly. And that's why I urge you to check into, if you're at YouTube listening to this, the free ebook offered below is a wonderful ebook and a video that goes with that on how to tap into the power of your subconscious mind. And the free video in the ebook shares a wonderful story about a man that learned the power of reflection, how to reflect abundance to the material world, and went on to a true life of success. So in the description area below, there's an access link called Bring My Dreams to Reality. That will access you to that free ebook. And if you're at my website, you will see an image at this blog article where I've embedded this podcast, a man sitting in the dark reading. That's supposed to be me, I think, from prison. And it says more on the power of the subconscious mind, the free ebook. Click on that image, that will take you to the free ebook. And I hope you will check that out. So to wrap this up, I also want to say, by the way, Willie passed away as a free man on March 31st, 2016. He was 86 years old at the time he passed away in 2016. He was released from prison in 2012. I had just gotten home a little bit before Willie had passed away, and it was just ironically that he lived about 30 to 40 miles away from my hometown in Massillon, Ohio. He lived in another area close to Massillon, Ohio. And I was able to visit with Willie a few times before he passed on. So that was a great gift for me to be able to see him. He was released from prison in 2012. I watched him walk out the prison gate, a free man, while I was still in there. And I wouldn't be released until later in 2015, where I'd served 8 years. So that's the story there. I hope that rings a bell and hits home with all of you that are wondering what really is salvation. Please support my work my books are on sale at my website at Ozark Mountain Publishing Company, Ozark Mountain Publishing Company, a mainstream publisher. Amazon.com, you can go find me there. There's links at the About Me page. All through my website, there's links how to buy my book. Also in bookstores everywhere books are sold. And please do me a favor, if you go into your favorite Barnes & Noble or Books A Million or even your local, whatever bookstore you go to, if my books are not on the store shelf, would you please ask them to get my books in there? Because they will gladly do that. You see, it's up to the author to do that. And I haven't been able to get around everywhere yet because I've only been home from prison myself 3 years now. And so I want to, maybe you could help me with a little bit of the legwork if you're appreciating this message. If you're in a bookstore, say, hey, can you get James Nussbaumer's books on our shelves here in this bookstore? And they will gladly do that. So I hope you'll subscribe to my mastermind group, which is a subscription-only group. If you're not ready for that, then there's the free version called the Everyday Miracles newsletter. Please subscribe to that. It's totally free. It arrives in your inbox a couple of days a week. And, you know, I support other people's work, other authors' work, you may notice at my blog, because they support my work. Somewhere, one of these authors whose work I support might be doing a podcast right now or whatever they do, radio show or whatever it might be. And they're recommending my work, and I recommend their work as well because I believe in what they have to offer. That just may help you live a life of feeling like you have reached salvation and are creating the life that you want. I hope this was beneficial for you today, and I hope you're thinking a lot about your own life and how naturally beautiful you are within. And that you need to start learning to reflect that inner beauty to the material world and making your life situation just wonderful. Please follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and at YouTube also. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's been fun. I hope you enjoyed my story today. I've got to run now. James Nussbaumer signing off. God bless.